And please use the chat for any questions or comments for us, but please do ask your questions. And then keep your microphone muted. I will reserve the right to mute your video or mic if necessary. And just please keep this a respectful place. But thank you everyone for coming out. As I mentioned, the bulk of our time today is going to be spent with John Greenfield of Streetsblog Chicago doing a live version of his 2024 Bike Lane Fest. So for the second year in a row, John's done a great series of all the new bikeways construction around the city. And so we wanted to give him an opportunity to kind of recap all those big, beautiful bike lanes that are getting added. And then I'm just going to give a really quick update on a couple of advocacy hot topics related to some of our state level work on transit funding and reform. And then, exciting stuff happening around our campaign to lower the default speed limit here in the city of Chicago. So don't go anywhere. But for now, I am going to turn it over to John.
All right, Jim, thanks for having me. It's great to be here again. Just a second, get my screen going here. All right. Now you folks all able to see the Streetsblog site?
I do not.
How's
No,
that?
we can't.
Okay, great.
Cannot.
You cannot. Okay.
No.
How's that?
Still not seeing it.
All right, are we going now?
Nope.
Okay, give me a minute here, folks. Thanks for bearing with us. Okay, now can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well, folks, again, I am John Greenfield with Streetsblog Chicago, the transportation news and advocacy website. We've been around in Chicago. We're part of the national network based in New York City, but we've been doing this in Chicago since 2013, so 11 years now. I should mention that we're currently in the middle of a fund drive, trying to raise money to fund our 2025 and 2026 publishing. If you would like to donate, just go to chi.streetsblog.org. And at the upper right-hand corner of the screen, there is a donation button. But let me talk about Streetsblog Chicago's Bike Lane Fest 2024. This year, like last year, the Chicago Department of Transportation has put a lot of work into getting new bikeways put in all over town. We're talking about from Rogers Park on the far north side to Austin on the far west side to the South Chicago neighborhood on the far southeast side. And so my mission with this was to try to visit every bike lane that CDOT had created in Chicago this year. And I did that over five different sessions, 5 different posts. And I basically worked my way counterclockwise around the city. Like if you view the city of Chicago like a clock, where Rogers Park is basically at 11 o'clock and South Chicago is at like 4 p.m. or 4 o'clock, then I was trying to work my way around counterclockwise. All right, so I started out, I'll just walk you through some of the posts I did, and we'll discuss what were some of the most interesting new bikeways that were put in, and I'll tell you a little bit about my thoughts about them. All right, so I started up on the far north side. One of the notable greenways that got built on the far northwest side this year was the Leland Greenway west of Clark Street to the river. So that's in like the 47th Ward. Matt Martin is the alder there. And there already is sort of a greenway heading east from Clark, but Leland is a 4700 North is a good east-west street. The west of Clark, it was one-way eastbound for most of it. So they put in this contraflow bike lane, and that's going, it's eventually going to go through the Lincoln Square neighborhood on Lincoln Avenue. Here's where they're going to be putting in a raised protected bike lane. It's part of a new plaza project at the Western L stop. Not much has happened with that segment yet, but the rest of it is pretty rideable at this point. So that's a nice development. And another interesting thing that's happened in that part of town is on Francisco Avenue by the river. I think that's in Alderman Vasquez's ward, the 40th ward. This used to be a two-lane side street, Francisco, along the river. And drivers used to like to use that as a cut-through route, as for doing long-distance crosstown trips, made this side street a little more dangerous. So they turned it into a one-way route. Here is what they did with the street, forcing drivers to turn left here. But there's a contraflow two-lane bikeway that meets up with the North Shore Channel Trail along here, which takes you all the way up to Evanston. So that's good that they did that. Another thing that I like that they've done in this part of town this year is the Berwyn neighborhood greenway. So from Andersonville on Berwyn, which is 5300 north, 1 block north of Foster, you used to not be able to ride from Berwyn and Clark to the lakefront, but now they put in a contraflow lane that allows you to ride in both directions. It might have been eastbound one way before, but now you can do both directions, so that's good. All right, let's move on. So to the second session I did, the second part of this travelogue. So this is Lincoln Square, Irving Park, Portage Park, and Albany Park. And one of the interesting things that happened here is, again, in Lincoln Square, they put in a raised bike lane here at two segments of the Levitt Neighborhood Greenway. That's 2200 West. And so this is sort of a six-way intersection, but there's a dead end here. So a neighborhood greenway, in case you didn't know, is a bike and pedestrian priority side street route. There's a group in town called Chicago Bike Grid Now that is advocating for having a grid of these kind of low-stress bikeway and pedestrian way streets all over the city. So this is a nice step towards this. They put in the raised bike lane. Here shows you how they widen the sidewalk. This is looking south on Lincoln Avenue towards Montrose. And I just talked to someone from the 47th Ward yesterday who said that all the paint is basically done for this thing now. So it's pretty much rideable. There's a little bit more of directional stuff they have to do in the intersection here, but otherwise it's good to go. All right. They also put in a neighborhood greenway on Berteau, which is 5200 west of Horner Park, and on Cullum, 5300 north, heading east. That was already a pretty good route, but now it's an official one. All righty, let's move on to part 3. And as I said, we're moving counterclockwise around the city. So now we're talking about some northwest neighborhoods: Portage Park, Irving Park, North Center, Avondale, Logan Square, Hermosa, Humboldt Park. Here at the top, here's a little bit of protected bike lane they put on Wrightwood Avenue, 2600 north, west of Pulaski. And tragically, one thing about this year, a lot of bikeways have been installed in places where there are ghost bike memorials. So those commemorate places where drivers have fatally struck bike riders. So this is an example of this. Sadly, Ronald Mendoza was fatally struck on his bike at the intersection of Wrightwood and Pulaski before they put in the protected bike lane. But hopefully the segment of protected bike lanes will help make this area safer in the future. Another example of that, tragically, is in the Irving Park neighborhood on Portage Park on Long Avenue, which is 5200 west. A teen named Joshua Anlu Buendia, 16-year-old, was fatally struck by a driver a few blocks south of Irving Park Road. This is a ghost bike for him. And then a few months later, another teen was struck and critically injured there. I think he's doing all right now. but they put in a neighborhood greenway on this street. They put in some traffic calming, paint and post bump outs to shorten crossing distances. That's going to be continuing south further. Let's see here. And we talked about Pulaski and Wrightwood. Let's move on to section 4. So we're heading to the west side of the city now. All right, so this top photo is in the Austin neighborhood on the far west side. That's where Mayor Johnson's from. I think he still lives there. And they did an interesting thing out there on Chicago Avenue, which is 800 North, in the Austin neighborhood, for about half a mile at the west end of the city between Central Park and Austin, 6000 West. So it's mostly non-protected bike lanes, but they did do little snippets of raised bike lanes that I've talked to Streetsblog Chicago's experts on protected intersections, which is a common thing in Europe, where they modified the intersection to make it safer for drivers to take a right turn without as much of a risk of them striking parallel protected bike lane traffic. So according to Stephen Lucy, who's one of our experts on that subject, this intersection sort of fits that mold in that drivers sort of have to slow down and are kind of at a right angle when crossing the bike lane. This is just a short segment of raised bike lane. Let's look at this video. Let's show you how this works. So here we are riding along this new raised sort of protected intersection thing, heading west on Chicago Avenue in Austin. So, it's kind of an interesting setup. I think of these things kind of more as demonstration projects rather than extended bikeways. You can see how it works. All right, and there's another one of these on Laramie Avenue around the corner from there. That's 5200 West. And what other interesting stuff is going on the west side? Let's see. New protected bike lanes have been installed on Belmont, west of Kimball. There's a very popular protected bike lane that goes from basically Western Avenue to the Belmont Blue Line station at Kimball. And it's been extended about a mile west to Milwaukee Avenue. That is still a work in progress, but there has been some progress on that. Let's see what else here. Here's an interesting example of, this is Grand Avenue in West Town. That's one of the most popular new bike projects that's been done in town in 2024. So this is a bus island that doubles as bike lane protection. So I think we're looking southeast towards downtown here. And this is wheelchair friendly. There's a curb cut here. So you come from here, cross here, roll on to here. And then the bus driver can just pull up to the bus island without having to pull over to the curb. People board there, and it shortens bus travel times. All right. There was a new protected bike lane built on Halsted Street it's sort of on and off from UIC in the South Loop or the near west side, and then continues into Canaryville and Englewood. So here's another example of a short protected bike lane section on Keeler Avenue. Cameron Bolton, who's one of our staff members, went over and shot that for me. You can see this uses the plastic instant curbs. These things are not quite as sturdy as concrete, so it's not ideal, but it's good that it's got some protection. Here we are going through Little Village. This is a neighborhood greenway leading to new protected bike lanes on 24th Boulevard in Little Village. But unfortunately, like some protected bikeways in the city, these have a bit of a drainage problem. So this is a photograph that a person who lives near their Dan Corn shot. And I think the last time when I dropped by here during my travels, it was also flooded. So, if we're going to have protected bike lanes, we need to make sure that they're good quality. The city needs to do a good job of getting garbage and leaves and broken glass out of them. So I'd like to see better maintenance. Let's see here. Just a second. All right, let's go to the fifth part, the final one on the south side, which I did on New Year's Day. It was a cold, windy day. And during most of my trips, I saw a lot of people riding bikes around the city and riding scooters. On this day, you know, maybe people were taking it easy after partying the night before, but it was, you know, below freezing and windy. So didn't see a lot of people riding bikes out there, but covered a large swath. I sort of alternated between using transit and using bikes. Let's see here. So probably the most interesting thing I saw on the south side is these raised bike lanes that were installed on Commercial Avenue in the South Chicago neighborhood on the far southeast side. So why don't we take another ride on this bike lane? So the thing about these raised bike lanes that the city has installed on you know, Commercial Avenue and on Chicago Avenue in Austin, I think they're interesting setups. This one has a pretty good division between pedestrian space and bike space. Like I wouldn't be too worried about people wandering over into the bike lane here. Would be nice if they painted the bike lane green. But it goes for 3 or 4 blocks, so it's really just a short thing. I would really like to see some longer stretches of bike lanes that are raised, because this does seem like a good approach in general, but only if the bike lane actually takes you somewhere, not just a few blocks at a time. All right, so you get the idea about that. Just a sec. So yeah, a few takeaways of what I saw from covering the entire city. Like I said, I think CDOT deserves a lot of credit for the hard work they did with this and the contractors. I do think there's a quantity over quality issue going on, that there's a lot of snippets of protected bike lanes that the city installed this year. I think the most effective, most popular protected bike lanes are the ones where they did long distances. You know, Augusta Boulevard in Westtown in the first ward, Alderman LaSpada's ward is a good example. That was about a mile, maybe a mile and a half of protected bike lane. Also Belmont Avenue in Avondale, that's in the 35th ward, Carlos Ramirez Rosa's ward. And again, with those things, they set up obvious places to go, not just little bits and pieces of safe bikeway. So that's the direction we should be heading in Chicago's, you know, not just doing little pieces of bike lane at a time, but trying to do long stretches that it's obvious where you're supposed to go. All right, well, that's a roundup of what I did during this last month of exploration. Maybe we could talk about it a little bit more later. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, John, for all that you do, but it's really exciting to see how much progress we're getting year over year on our bike network. And, you know, plus one shout out to the hardworking CDOT folks who are making those projects possible. It doesn't seem like we have, there's a question, John. Do you know if there is a GIS data which reflects all these recent improvements and would include detailed facility type? The city's open data portal only provides buffered, shared, protected, and bike types.
You know, good people to talk about that would be the Chicago Hack Night folks have done a good map of some of this stuff. I made my own because theirs wasn't completely current at the time I did this exploration. But if you want to talk to those folks, I can put you in touch with them, and they probably got all the details on that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about the GIS data, but I know on the CDOT website there's a lot of good updated maps on where they're doing the concrete curb upgrades and things like that too. Another question from Valerie: do you think CDOT is leaning toward raised bike lanes over separated?
Um, yeah, just to add to what Jim said there, there are some links in our post that link to the CDOT data. There's a spreadsheet where you can see all the completed, in progress, and upcoming bike lanes. So just go to one of the Streets blog posts and you'll see that stuff in the intro. There's also a map that shows the completed stuff in total. I just wanted to show the stuff that was completed this year. All right, so what was that question again? The
Uh, oh, just like, do you think that, having seen the raised bike lane, the grade separated bike lane, do you think CDOT is leaning towards doing more of those over just the standard protected bike lanes that we've seen?
um, Yeah, well, we're definitely seeing a movement with CDOT towards low stress bikeways. So about 90% of all bikeways installed in 2023 were either neighborhood greenways, which are traffic calm side street routes, or protected bike lanes on main streets. And the raised bike lanes, that's sort of a newer trend. One place where raised bike lanes have existed in the city for a long time have been on Roosevelt Road near the Roosevelt stop, heading east a couple blocks into Grant Park. But again, that's sort of a demonstration project. It only goes for a few blocks. Um, I do think the projects we saw in Austin and South Chicago, they are demonstration projects, but maybe those will become wider spread in the future. We're definitely seeing a lot more protected bike lanes. I mean, one thing that's really cool is Milwaukee Avenue from the Logan Square Monument, the Eagle Pillar, that basically goes all the way to Kinsey Street, where there's a protected bike lane. There's also a protected bike lane heading south from Des Plaines Street. So that's right outside the central loop. That's all protected bike lanes now because they put in a segment between California and Kedzie. The only place where there are no protected bike lanes on that stretch is in Wicker Park between Division and North Avenue. Um, and the reason for that is that's a very retail dense area where there's a lot of parking demand. I know there has been kind of backlash to converting parking spaces to create protected bike lanes there. But basically, all of Milwaukee, north of North Avenue to Logan Boulevard, Kedzie, basically they've converted most or all of the car parking spots on the southwest side of the street to make room for the protected bike lanes. And as far as I can see, aside from a few quibbles from some of the merchants, there haven't been major issues. Like, I haven't heard of any major problems with the new stretch between California and Kedzie. So let's keep our fingers crossed. One thing I can say about that stretch is that one of our freelancers, Sharon Hoyer, went out there and on a 32-degree Fahrenheit day, she counted bike riders at California and Milwaukee, and she saw a total of about 60 in each direction in an hour, which is a lot on such a cold day. I mean, it definitely is a highway for bike commuting. But yeah, to answer the question, I do think we will see more raised bikeways. One thing I would like to see is having different levels for raised bikeways. Like, with the Roosevelt raised bikeway I was talking about, there's a bit of an issue that people going to Bears games and Soldier Field concerts and stuff tend to walk in the raised bike lane. There's not much division between the pedestrian area and the bike area. But what they do in cities like Copenhagen is they have different levels. They have the street level for drivers. They've got the bike lane level for bicyclists, and then another inch or so above, they've got the sidewalk area for pedestrians. So that helps keep people from parking in bike lanes, or for pedestrians, keeps pedestrians from wandering into bike lanes. So yeah, I'd like to see more of that here.
And something, another kind of consideration I know that comes into play with having the grade separated bikeways versus the on-street protected bike lanes with the curb separation is like what kind of project it is. So like the Commercial Avenue project was like they're reconstructing the entire like streetscape. And so that provides an opportunity for CDOT to do kind of bigger things like having that grade separated bikeway, because it's just a larger project where they're going to be moving around, the utilities and the drainage and the curbs and all that stuff that has to go into. So it also often kind of depends, how big of the bigger project is kind of, you can have a more dramatic, right, kind of upgrade. And I think, what we've seen and what we want to continue to see over time is like as those projects come in line and different corridors that already have existing, protected bike lanes, we see things continue to get upgraded, right, to a lower and lower stress design. And I think we've definitely seen that over the last few years with the kind of expansion of the concrete curb protected bike lanes, and how, we've seen a lot of places go from a buffered bike lane to a bollard protected bike lane to a concrete curb protected bike lane over the last like 3 or 4 years. And I think that's kind of a similar progression we could begin to see as we continue to build out the network and move towards even better grade separated bike lanes. So it's good,
Yeah, we should give a
conversation.
little credit. We should cut a little slack to CDOT because they do actually have a pretty tough task in we've got our aldermanic prerogative system in Chicago where alderpersons can basically veto infrastructure if they don't want it in their ward. So in order to get an extended, the reason Augusta is such a good bike lane that goes for like a mile and a half is because Alderman Laspada of the first ward, that bikeway was mostly in his ward, so he was pretty much the only person who had to sign off on it. There's one other alder with a small portion of it. But it's really good when you get a few bike-friendly alders who team up for a long extended route. For example, the Levitt Greenway, 2200 West, north of the north branch of the river, that goes through a few different wards. I think it's Wagasback 32, Matt Martin 47, Alderman Vasquez in the 40th, maybe one other. And they all kind of agreed, hey, we want to do this. We want to have a bike corridor on a low stress side street. And so they were able to do something, I think it's about 3 miles long. Yeah, politics has a lot to do with where bike lanes get built. And we're seeing CDOT has done a good job in recent years with neighborhood outreach, where they've done extended outreach, trying to get more feedback from residents in lower income communities of color in particular, try to make sure people feel ownership of the bike lanes. For example, in 2023, there weren't that many bikeways put in on the southwest side in neighborhoods like Brighton Park. CDOT did some outreach since then, and there were a number put in Brighton Park and other neighborhoods near there, Little Village. But politics definitely plays a role. Like if you look at the parts of town where a lot of people voted for Donald Trump, those are the parts of town in general where no bike lanes get installed. That's because the alder does not give CDOT the go ahead to build them. So if we want to have a grid of bike-friendly streets all across town, we really need to build up support from them, from politicians, and from residents.
Great. And Neville was asking about protected intersections. I know you mentioned a bit about that, but could you say more about what you saw in your travels or thoughts on protected intersections as part of future projects here in Chicago?
Yeah, as I was saying, the person who writes for Streetsblog, who's the biggest advocate for protected intersections, basically two of them, the co-founder Stephen Vance, and then a contributor named Stephen Lucy. And so, as people like to point out, the most dangerous part of your bike ride is when you cross an intersection. And you got to watch out for drivers turning right who might right hook you, or drivers turning left who might left hook you. So protected intersections that's a thing that's common in bike-friendly places like the Netherlands and Denmark, where they've got it designed so you're not spending that much time as a cyclist crossing the street. Where the driver is turning, there's protection keeping them from hitting you, and the driver is going to cross paths with the bike lane at a right angle instead of, if you don't have a protected intersection, it's going to be more of a closer thing. It's easier for you to miss each other. So that is something that would be great if we can just start having those at all major intersection crossings with bikeways. And I think CDOT is trying to get hip to it. Other bike-friendly cities in the rest of the United States are doing it commonly. Like I know they're big in San Francisco. Probably there are protected intersections in Portland and Seattle and other places that have good bike networks.
Um, so from Benjamin, more of a thought, just talking about, how do we demonstrate the kind of economic impact of installing bike lanes, um, and saying, how can we, have a more granular study that can really show some good evidence. I don't know if you have thoughts on the kind of economic impact of protected bike lanes, John. I always like to point people, to Milwaukee Avenue through River West, where, there's been a protected bike lane there for decades, not decades, a decade. And yeah, they seem to be doing fine over there. So, those types of economic analyses there have been some done around the country, but locally we haven't had like an ambitious grad student or someone who wants to do like look at the sales tax receipts or something like that. But I think it's a great point and like a really important talking point to say that, when we make walkable, bikeable neighborhoods, that's only going to, support a robust local retail environment. But John, I don't know if you have things to say about that.
Yeah, that's definitely something that the city of Chicago should do is provide some numbers that show that protected bike lanes are helping with sales revenue on the streets where we're doing parking conversions. This kind of came up, one of the hottest new protected bike lane projects coming up in the region is in Evanston, just north of the city of Chicago, where Northwestern University is. So the city has proposed doing a protected bike lane going, I think it's a little under 3 miles from Davis Street to the Chicago City border at Howard Street. And initially, this was going to replace about 66 car parking spots. There was a bit of a revolt from some merchants about that. And they were able to actually jigger things around so that they will be gaining 2 car parking spots, believe it or not. But there's still some controversy because people won't be having car parking spots exactly where they want them. There's already really good protected bike lanes in Evanston on that street, Chicago Avenue, heading up to Sheridan Road, going up to the border of the next suburb north, Wilmette. So those have really proved done well, and Evanston does a good job of maintaining them. I've ridden those bike lanes after a lot of snow has fallen, and they were very nice and cleared. So it'd be great if there were protected bike lanes that went all the way from Howard Street up to David Street in Evanston. I think we'd see a lot more people biking between Chicago and Evanston. So when I wrote about the Evanston thing, I pointed to some studies in New York and Seattle that showed that protected bike lane projects that did involve converting some car parking um, did result in higher sales tax revenue. So they had a net gain. When you make a street more walkable, more bikeable, more people want to visit it. And I think merchants also tend to overestimate just how many of their clients are coming via car. A lot of people are coming by other modes, walking, biking, and transit. So, that's an important thing that we gotta convince people, we gotta convince merchants that it's in their interest to have protected bike lanes, even if we convert some parking spaces for it. And converting car parking, as you know, is it's a particularly fraught in the city of Chicago because we have our nightmarish 75-year parking contract that Mayor Richard M. Daley got passed. And that means that when we convert parking spaces for things like bike lanes, we have to reimburse the concessionaire. But I heard from a Bike Friendly Alder's chief of staff that it's actually not that big a deal financially when the city wants to put in protected bike lanes, convert some parking spaces to do it. The loss of revenue kind of comes out in the wash. It's not that expensive to do it. But yeah, these things can make retail districts more vibrant. And let's talk about the safety benefits of protected bike lanes. When we're talking about Milwaukee Avenue, between Western Avenue and California Avenue in Logan Square, a year after they were installed, the city found that they had, I think it was a 30% decrease in all kinds of traffic crashes on that stretch after the protected bike lanes were put in. And there were 0 pedestrian crashes during that year. So, I think it's pretty easy to demonstrate that protected bike lanes have financial and safety benefits, even if we do convert some parking spaces for them.
Great. Yeah. Uh, thank you, John. We've had a lot of topics and thoughts flying in here. So apologies if I skip over you. Valerie was asking, do you think the priority should be more protected bike lanes and high stress streets over or low stress neighborhood greenways? Where do
Um,
you come down on this one, John?
okay, well, it's a good question. I did create something for the Chicago Reader called the Mellow Chicago Bike Map, which the first draft of that I did a few years ago before there were that many protected bike lanes. So I mostly emphasized quiet side street routes that have signalized crossings of main streets. Like before they put I was into Levitt Street before Levitt Street was cool. But the city of Chicago made Levitt even better. They made it a greenway that would work in both directions by using contraflow bike lanes, wrong way bike lanes, so you can do it both north and south. Before it used to be good just as a northbound route from the North Branch of the Chicago River to like Rose Hill Cemetery. All right, I think there are benefits to both. Um, I would say, if you're riding with a family or something, or if you just would like to be in a less stressful environment, the side street routes are great. I mean, I think neighborhood greenways also make streets a nicer place to live. Um, one thing that we haven't done with our neighborhood greenways that other cities on the West Coast have done with their bike boulevards, which are basically the same thing, except Chicago has not had any luck getting traffic diverters installed. So as I was saying earlier, drivers like to use side streets as cut through routes, as shortcuts to get around traffic on main streets, but they're really not intended for that. So in other bike friendly cities, they've created bike boulevards, side street routes where it's impossible for drivers to use them as cut throughs because they have barriers like concrete curbs or things like that that force drivers to get off the side street and get onto a main street when they come to those. But they allow bikes and pedestrians to do a straight route. So we really need to try that out in Chicago. I know there was talk in doing it on Wood Street in Westtown. They wanted to do it on Manor in west of the river near Lincoln Square, but the neighbors kind of rebelled against that. I mean, that's a problem in Chicago is like I don't think people have quite wrapped their head around the idea that we want to convert more car trips into other modes. So if you're proposing something that makes driving slightly less convenient, there tends to be a backlash. One hot project that's going on right now that's being discussed is Granville Avenue on the north side. That's 6200 North. So CDOT has proposed it currently is used as a cut through route because it's a continuous route, 6200 North. It's between Peterson and Devon, 6000 and 6400 North, which are supposed to be the arterial routes. But a lot of people use Granville as a shortcut. But CDOT proposes putting in some one-way sections for drivers on Granville, but contraflow bike lanes that would allow it to be a continuous biking street. And I'm optimistic that might happen, but there has been a backlash from more windshield perspectives. Like there are some car-centric neighborhood newspapers around there that have been speaking out against it. They use the term metastasizing, spreading like a cancer to describe neighborhood greenways, which I think is pretty ridiculous. Neighborhood greenways are good. They're not harmful. And okay, so in terms of the neighborhood greenway versus protected bike lane debate, protected bike lanes are definitely great if you want to do a fast, direct route. You want to access retail on main streets. I mean, we really should. The city of Chicago has already proposed something called spoke routes. There are certain bike routes that are already important streets for getting downtown. So working our way around the clock, of course, we got the Lakefront Trail as an important commuting route. And then you got Clark Street, Clybourne Avenue, Milwaukee Avenue, Grand Avenue, Ogden Avenue, Archer Avenue, Vincennes, South Chicago. So those are all these shortcuts that you can use to get downtown from other parts of the city. So every one of those should be a safe place to ride a bike. And CDOT has made some steps in recent years to help do that. For instance, Vincennes on the southwest side It's a diagonal street that they added some physical protection to. And I know protected bike lanes can be kind of controversial. If you really want to ride as fast as you can across the city, they might not be your first choice. But it's important to think of protected bike lanes as being kind of like, when you go to a ski hill, there's like the expert, the black slopes that are for people who really know how to ski well and want to ski in a very adventurous way. And then when you bring your kids there, you go to the bunny slope. You go to something that's less scary, easier to do. And that's what protected bike lanes are. They help broaden the appeal of cycling. Um, but yeah, we need to improve the quality of protected bike lanes. We need to make sure they're not flooding, they're not getting filled with trash. They are plowed, the leaves are removed, garbage is removed. We want to make them so even skilled cyclists want to use them. We also should make protected bike lanes wider so it's easier for bike riders to pass each other. We certainly don't want people to think of protected bike lanes as being something that makes their biking less convenient. So we need to have high quality ones. They need to be connected with each other. So again, it's about quality over quantity is what we want.
All right, awesome. Thank you, John. Thanks everyone for the conversation and the chatter going on. But I am going to move us along because there is a lot to talk about in the world of active transportation advocacy. So a couple of things before, thank you, John, as always, for everything you do and for your reporting on the exciting progress um, around around town. One of the things that's also going on that has been happening over the last couple of years that's really behind a lot of the new bikeways and pedestrian infrastructure that we've seen is the city's capital program called Chicago Works. And so the city has had its own kind of dedicated dollars. And for the first time, this program has really put a lot of money aside for complete streets projects like better walking and biking infrastructure. And so CDOT has been able to use this money to really fill in a lot of gaps and do a lot of innovative things where previously they maybe would have had to negotiate with aldermen to get like TIF money or money from the aldermanic menu or get a grant from the state or the federal government to get something done. So it's really hard to overstate just how impactful this local bond money has been. And it is expiring. And so we're working on, understanding how, the process on getting this bond renewed and how we can advocate in support of that because we know it's been really transformational and one of the reasons that we've seen so many of these projects that John was just talking about come into play. So stay tuned for more about helping us advocate for getting that money rolling. But a couple of other hot topics I wanted to share with folks. We have, this is going to be a really big year, all hands on deck for Chicago transit funding and governance reform. Folks hopefully have been with us along this journey over the last couple of years that started with a big regional planning process led by the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning to put together a plan of action for regional transit to fix what's broken about our regional transit system. And that included a number of different recommendations that then needed to be turned into legislation that our state house could pass and help us get our solve a lot of the underlying structural issues that are out of the heart of things like
You're on the slide. Yeah.
Yeah, I think someone got excited about the picture. We're working with allies across the state and with the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, Illinois Environmental Council, and a whole host of others on pushing for additional transit funding, $1.5 billion in new funding a year for transit, and also governance reform. So looking at how can we, recognizing our transit system really operates on a regional level, how do we make sure that we're actually planning on a regional basis and not having our agencies competing against each other as they so often are doing right now? And so stay tuned. This is going to be a really big year for transit already. This is the picture I have up here on the slide. This week, people are already advocating. Advocates went down to the Capitol as part of Climate Day at the Capitol on Tuesday. And maybe sounds like some of you were there. Advocating for, among other things, the Clean and Equitable Transportation Act, which is the legislation that really captures all of those policy recommendations that were put together through that process led by our regional planning agency. So things are happening right now. There's a lot of inside baseball negotiations, but our role as advocates is to make sure that we're reaching out to our state representatives and state senators and letting them know that we want to see them get something done that's going to give us the transit system that we deserve. In other news, focusing more locally in the city of Chicago, we have exciting progress on our campaign to lower the default speed limit here in the city of Chicago. Oh, one quick question about talk more about the flex funding from the highway to transit projects. We're actually talking about doing a deep dive, Josh, on that topic and as a separate webinar. So stay tuned for more on that.
I will just say, Jim, if you need, I have a contact at the Green New Deal Network. John, I know you had written an article with his support. So if you just need any contact information, happy to supply it if you don't have it already.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah, that's all then.
What Josh was talking about there is, I mean, one of the big structural issues, right, with transportation writ large is the massive disparity and the amount of resources going into car investment and car infrastructure, which is still going to be inefficient, no matter if it's driven by a robot or runs on a battery. So shifting, the state does have some authority to be able to shift some of those dollars towards transit projects and capital projects like building new transit infrastructure in particular. Pennsylvania just did this. So it's an example of one of the many more aggressive things we could be doing to really kind of make this transition. So stay tuned. Lots coming up on transit. We're going to do some kind of more deep dives on that over the coming months, because this is going to be, like I said, kind of all hands on deck. Speaking of all hands on deck, for the last 6 months or so, we've been pushing really hard with many of your support on lowering Chicago speed limit through an ordinance in the city council, thanks to the leadership of Alderman Daniel LaSpada. We are closer than we have ever been to getting across the finish line here. We are expecting the ordinance to have a final vote at city council next Wednesday at the 15th. At the regular city council meeting that will be taking place at 10 a.m. In the meantime, we're trying something new, a new alert. If you have sent an email to your alderman using our advocacy software, now we're trying something different where if you follow that link I just added, it will connect you over the phone to your alderman. So you'll get a phone call and it'll connect you right to your alderman's office. You'll hear my voice suggesting things that you could say to them. But this is what we're really asking people to do between now and next Wednesday is, even if you know your alderman is supporting lowering the speed limit, give them a call. You could give their office a call. You can use this link to do it really quickly, but you can do it on your own as well. But definitely reach out and let them know that you support lowering the default speed limit to 25 miles per hour. In addition, we're anticipating a vote on an ordinance that would create a working group to look at kind of reforming the traffic fines and fees from an equity perspective. And the work of that group would kind of take place before the speed limit would actually be lowered. So it's a really exciting opportunity for us to become national leaders, not just on lowering the speed limit, but on looking at how we can make a more equitable system of community accountability for safety on our roadways. So follow that link. Hopefully, I'm interested in feedback on how, if people are taking advantage of it, how it works. That's our first time using the click to call function. And share it with your friends, family, or neighbors that live in the city, because we're going to be kind of full steam ahead between now and next Wednesday. In addition to the full city council meeting next Wednesday, next Tuesday, the Pedestrian and Traffic Safety Committee is having a hearing on the most recent city traffic crash report that was published this past fall, as well as getting an update on the first annual update on the Complete Streets Ordinance that Alderman Matt Martin helped lead, which basically required kind of a checklist of bicycle and pedestrian improvements to be considered on most of our street improvement projects. So anytime you say, hey, they just resurfaced the street, why didn't they fix, the damn crosswalk when they did it? This was an ordinance like looking to kind of fill that gap and make it a little bit more transparent on how decisions are being made. So we're going to get an update on the 14th about those two things, but we'll be there also advocating, about the speed limit vote that will be happening the next day. You can help by, again, calling your alderman, reaching out to them and sharing that with your friends and family and neighbors. Beyond that, there's going to be a lot more coming down the pike. I mentioned the bike and pedestrian project funding here in Chicago, making sure that we're battling for that Chicago Works funding to keep those dollars going to CDOT so they can keep building more of those big, beautiful bike lanes. But we're also anticipating more regionally and statewide. We worked really hard last year with communities to get them to apply for $140 million in funding from the state of Illinois for bicycle and pedestrian projects. So we're going to get those awards will be announced. We'll be able to celebrate some cool stuff happening around the region, thanks to money that we all advocated for and got put into the state budget. So way to go, us. Transit priority streets is going to be a big thing in 2025 here in the city. We are working with a lot of community-based organizations around town as CTA and CDOT get ready to do kind of the next phase of planning around creating streets that prioritize bus traffic with bus lanes and transit signal improvements and better bus stops, all that good stuff. So stay tuned as that process gets rolling. It'll be a really important opportunity to advocate for bus rapid transit in places like Western Avenue. Finally, you can get involved with us with our street team advocacy training program. We're going to be sharing word of some new trainings for this year to help folks plug into all the things I was just talking about. We'll continue the Advocacy Connects, so stay tuned for next month's Suburban Advocacy Connect, and we will be back here talking about Chicago stuff in March. So in the meantime, just thanks everyone for coming out. Please let me flash this last slide here. Don't be a stranger. Please reach out to us. Me, my colleague Alex is also online here today. So reach out to us. We're happy to talk and to scheme and help get you engaged in our advocacy work. Thanks again, John, for as always, for all that you do and for your presentation.
Thanks for having me. And folks, if you appreciate that Streetsblog is around to advocate for this stuff and to check out new bikeways and new transit facilities and things like that, please do consider chipping in for our fund drive. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Please support John and the good folks at Streetsblog with their work is really essential for our movement. Thanks everyone, and we will be back in March. Talk to you soon.